This video is for two kinds of people. The first type is wanting to know, how can I become an herbalist? What are my different options if I want to do this either at home or professionally? And the other type wants to know, what even is an herbalist? What exactly is it that herbalists do? And are they all the same? First, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Jovi Hawthorne Brown, aka the Feral Plant Hag, and I went to college for 6 years to study biology and herbalism so that you don't have to. I first opened my online herbal apothecary back in 2011, and now I grow a small regenerative herb farm in Oregon. And I'm an herbal educator known for sharing grounded information through an inclusive and anti capitalist lens, without expecting you to live perfectly clean or all natural or forego things like vaccinations. So, whether you have no idea at all what an herbalist does, or even if you think you've got a pretty good handle on it, your idea of an herbalist might be entirely different from somebody else's based on your background or their background. Clearly, because I'm about to share 11 different ways to be an herbalist, and actually, even it's a few more than that. So maybe when you think of an herbalist, you might be picturing someone who is a nature lover, who is plucking mushrooms in the forest and communing with the trees and sipping tea amongst the flowers. And that is certainly one way to be an herbalist if that's what feels good to you. If you're like me when I was first learning, you might picture a more medically inclined person who is taking down histories and making herbal recommendations, trying to help folks with their specific ailments. And the thing is, both of these types of herbalists do exist, and there's a whole wide range in between and outside of these two examples. An herbalist, by definition, is just somebody who studies and practices the medicinal and therapeutic benefits of plants. That's it, that's all it takes. So if you work with plants in any medicinal or therapeutic way, you are an herbalist. So, under that definition, there are so many wonderful and beautiful ways to work with plants, and we need folks practicing all of them. So, in this video, I'm going to shed some light on several different paths that your herbal journey might lead you down. But first and foremost, I really want to emphasize that you do not have to turn herbalism into a career or make a single penny off of it in order to call yourself an herbalist. Living under capitalism, we're taught from a really young age that we're supposed to find something that we're passionate about and then find a way to monetize it so that we never work a day in our life. And while there are certainly ways to make a living practicing herbalism, it is perfectly okay and even encouraged to allow yourself to pursue a passion simply because it brings you joy, not because you make money doing it. As a matter of fact, finding joy, nurturing it, sharing it with others, and living a life of reciprocity rather than transaction is one of the greatest powers we have to push back against the constant societal pressure to be productive. Putting financial pressure on something that brings you joy does open up the opportunity for hustle culture to sneak in there and steal that joy right away from you. With all that in mind, here are some personal as well as professional paths that your herbal journey might lead you down. We'll start off with home herbalists, not only because this is a great place for any herbal path to begin, but because these are the most needed types of herbalists in this day and age. It's also a perfectly valid path to stay on as long as you like. An herbalist in every home is the motto of the iconic herbalist Rosemary Gladstar, and for good reason. Empowering ourselves to create our own simple herbal infusions, teas, salves, balms, in order to take care of ourselves and each other is one of the single most powerful ways we can become less reliant upon these systems that are failing us. Knowledge is power, and building trust in yourself and the natural world is incredibly powerful. And you can do this just at home. You don't have to capitalize on it in order for it to be beneficial to you, to your loved ones, to your community, and really to the entire planet. Now, that said, there are still plenty of other paths you can follow if you do choose to move beyond home herbalism, such as medicine making. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to grow the herbs. You don't have to take one on one clients. You can simply focus on making products if that's what you enjoy. You can make them just for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your community. If you're getting really good feedback from your products, from your friends and family, then you might consider maybe putting them on a website or opening up a little farm stand or sharing it at the farmer's market, doing street fairs and booth events, or maybe even someday opening up a brick and mortar shop if there's a demand for it in your area. Just know that there are some really strict regulations as far as labeling, good manufacturing processes, and FDA regulations. Since herbal products are not monitored by the FDA, if you begin to claim that they are diagnosing, curing, treating anything, then they are no longer an herbal supplement. They are a drug, and the FDA will get involved. So make sure to label your products very carefully. And avoid making any claims or guarantees at all because every herb is different and every person is different. If you're really into how the plants grow, you can become an herb farmer. And you don't have to do this on like a large commercial agricultural scale. I started doing this on a quarter-acre plot that I had in town. You can harvest a lot of herbal product from a very small amount of space. You can use these harvests for your own products if you're making products, or you can grow them for other local herbalists. Or if you get to a certain scale, if you are large enough, there are commercial wholesalers that, like big companies like Mountain Rose and Frontier Herbs and Star West, they don't grow their own herbs. They connect with farmers all around the world and they bring in their supply to package it and sell it online to all over the world. You can be one of those farmers, especially for native plants, especially for at-risk plants. The closer we can source all of these things without having to ship them from around the world, the better it is for the planet. As an herb farmer, you can also offer seeds, you can offer plant starts. A lot of medicinal plants can be really hard, if not impossible, to find in local garden centers and nurseries because they're just not that well known. Or even better, if you can set up like a neighborhood seed exchange or plant swap where everybody brings what they have in excess of, this sort of cuts out the capitalistic aspect of it and nurtures more of a sense of community and reciprocity and resource sharing, especially if you're the way I've always been and you end up planting way more than you have space for. Even if you're more of an introvert and not feeling very social, you can still set up like a little plant stand that's a take a plant, leave a plant, or a seed library without having to interact while still contributing to your community. You can also become a folk herbalist. Now, folk herbalism is based mainly on traditions that have been passed down through the generations within a specific culture or a specific region. Typically, folk herbalists gain their knowledge through firsthand experience with local plants and seeing how they affect people through observation rather than through formal programs or scientific research. Folk herbalism, especially within indigenous communities around the world, is actually a main source of why we decided to start looking at scientific research on these plants and whether they work or not. I have a lot of opinions about that, and we'll talk more about that later. When a folk herbalist shares their skills with their community, they might also be called a community herbalist. Now, you don't have to be a folk herbalist to be a community herbalist, but you can be both. Most community herbalists will also emphasize the traditional and historical uses of these herbs, but their practice is also usually supported by scientific research and modern discoveries. Community herbalists usually get their knowledge from formal schooling or apprenticeships, and like I said, they might also be a folk herbalist or even a clinical herbalist, which we'll talk about later, but they don't have to be. Community herbalists act as teachers, sharing knowledge with their community. They focus on empowering the people within their local neighborhoods or towns through things like in-person classes, educational workshops, community gardens, local apothecaries, and community outreach programs. Many community herbalists opt to reach out to underserved populations and participate in mutual aid efforts. Now, many herbalists, but not all, are foragers, and we absolutely need as many people as possible who are knowledgeable in tending to and preserving their region's local flora. So many native medicinal plants are endangered or at risk of becoming endangered, and they need protection from both overharvesting and from habitat loss due to either land development or invasive species crowding them out. Getting involved with the United Plant Savers is a great place to get started with this type of work. And these next ones you may not have thought of initially as ways that you can be an herbalist, but they absolutely are. Because we can share these plants in so many other ways aside from their biochemical actions or their medicinal qualities. For example, if you're a writer who loves plants, you can become an herbal author. You can write about a plant's history or folklore, or about its medicinal or energetic properties, even about its astrology, or even about your own personal experiences with them. Folks love hearing about personal experiences with plants. Along those same lines, you could become an herbal artist. Many herbal professionals and entrepreneurs out there are looking for photographers, videographers, paintings of plants, drawings of plants, or other artistic endeavors like jewelry making, fabric dyeing, you name it. Plants are natural works of art on their own. There are countless ways to interpret them and share them through your own unique artistic vision. And that counts as herbalism. There are also culinary herbalists. This blends the art and science of cooking with the art and science of herbalism to intertwine the worlds of flavor and health both at home or in a restaurant setting. Culinary herbalists often experiment with herbs, spices, and seasonally foraged plants in order to elevate the nutritional value of their dishes while also adding unique or exciting flavors. Now, culinary herbalism is such an important skill on so many levels beyond nutritional value. While the simple act of gathering to enjoy lovingly prepared food is healing in its own right, introducing the awareness of these plants to folks who otherwise wouldn't have given them a second thought because we've all gotten used to seeing the same foods and the same flavors so often, folks just don't know that a lot of these medicinal edible culinary plants exist. So, sharing these plants through everyday meals can lead to their stories being shared, and maybe even more in depth study, and ideally, their preservation. And then, with enough practice and experience and time to build your confidence, you can become an herbal educator. Since herbalism is a tradition and a practice that belongs to the people, it's important that this is carried on by the people. I know for me personally, educating about herbs is a huge responsibility and it's asking a lot of trust from people, and I do not take that lightly. So it was a very long time before I felt confident enough to start sharing information that I had gathered that I had both learned and unlearned and had to relearn over my 15 years of experience. And then lastly, we have the clinical herbalists. This is what many folks, I assume, think of when they hear the word herbalist. But as we've clearly seen, this is definitely not the only way to be an herbalist. Now, a clinical herbalist typically sees one-on-one clients, either face-to-face in person or virtually. But it involves consultations and in-depth history taking, and really getting a good understanding of everything that's going on with that person. Clinical herbalists might also work with other healthcare professionals like doctors or nurse practitioners to make sure that their recommendations are complementary to other things that the client might be going through. Now, a clinical herbalist education is typically formal rather than passed down, and it should include both a foundation in modern science as well as the historical uses of these herbs. There's also a lot more emphasis on human physiology in clinical herbalism, and they'll need a strong understanding of things like anatomy, pathophysiology, biochemistry, phytochemistry, as well as botany, herb drug interactions, and herbal formulation. In addition to their formal education, clinical herbalists often learn through an apprenticeship with an experienced herbalist, and some even go to medical school. So while clinical herbalism might sound or appear very medical, I cannot emphasize this enough. Ethical herbalists never attempt to diagnose, cure, or treat disease. They don't run tests and they don't interpret results. Any of this would be considered practicing medicine without a license, which is a felony. There are, however, a couple of routes for licensure through more specialized fields of study. Because licensure or certification for herbalism on its own in the US does not exist, and we'll get into that in a different video. But there are practices rooted in traditional Eastern medicine, such as Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, that do have national boards that allow you to practice under the protection of a license in the US if you qualify. There is a National Ayurvedic Medical Association certification board, and there's also a National Certification Commission for acupuncture and oriental medicine. As far as Western herbalism, there are naturopathic doctors. These folks are educated and trained in accredited naturopathic medical colleges, which are 4-year postgraduate medical programs that follow a 4-year pre-med bachelor's program. So you're looking at least 8 years of school. Plus, in addition to standard medical school curriculum, NDs complete training in things like nutrition, acupuncture, homeopathic medicine, botanical medicine, and counseling. Now, you've probably heard of naturopathy, but it's important to note that a naturopathic doctor is not the same thing as a naturopath. Traditional naturopaths, who are not licensed NDs, can get their education through some combination of a mentorship program, a long distance learning program, or other type of schooling on natural health or holistic studies. But there are no prerequisite requirements in place in order for someone to call themselves a naturopath. They do not undergo licensing or board examinations the way naturopathic doctors do. And other health professionals, such as chiropractors, massage therapists, dentists, nurses, or even physicians who do practice under a license in their specific field, a license for being a chiropractor or a license for being a nurse, they might also include some naturopathic methods and therefore call themselves a naturopath. So just keep that in mind and maybe be a little bit skeptical when you see the word naturopath and try and confirm if they are a naturopathic doctor. And it's not to say that naturopaths don't know what they're talking about, but it is a title that is often used in a misleading way, intentionally or not, to lead someone into thinking that they might be a doctor. So that's it. Now, can someone be more than one type of herbalist? Absolutely. These categories are by no means meant to be exclusive. And in fact, they rarely are. You'll often see community herbalists or folk herbalists or home herbalists who are also medicine makers. But they don't have to be. You can source your preparations from elsewhere, from other herbalists. Many folk herbalists are also community herbalists. Any type of herbalist can become an herbal educator or a culinary herbalist if that's what they feel called to do. It was probably 10 years into my herbal journey before I felt confident enough to call myself an herbalist. Now, 15 years into it, I also call myself an herbal educator, an herb farmer, and a medicine maker. And even though I got into this really wanting to become a clinical herbalist, the more I learned about the plants, the more I learned that just doesn't feel right for me. So it's also totally okay to start on one herbal path and end up somewhere totally different. The possibilities are endless, so don't feel like you have to use these categories as boxes that you have to fit into. Make your herbal journey your own by following the paths that feel good to you. Now, if you would like to continue your herbal education on a path that blends community herbalism with medicine making and herb farming through a lens that balances both modern science and these traditions, then maybe you would enjoy learning with me. There will be a link in the description to explore some of my herbal programs, or you can ask me any questions you might have in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and for listening, and if you've made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing to see more.